Hey guys, welcome back once again. Today we've got a lot to work on. So what you see here laying on the ground is a bunch of hardboard or masonite, and we're going to use that to build or extend the backdrop with those sheets over there. And then all these here, all 12 of these are going to become the valance. And then what I have there, you can see I've kind of drawn all over that. That is going to be the sub road bed over by the wall. So we'll walk into the layout here just behind me. So if we go under that sub road bed I was talking about, that's going to go up here in this corner and come out there off of this sub road bed. So that will probably become a different video. I just figured I should mention it, that I'm working on that. What I'm going to do now is extend the backdrop. So you can see right now it's not low, it's not like that's a problem, but what's going to happen is, and we didn't plan for this because originally I wasn't going to have a valance, but I decided I feel like doing it. So anyway, plan B will have to be extending the backdrop because we don't want either those lights won't be visible, but the lights that'll be on the other side of the peninsula, which have yet to be installed, those would be visible from this side if we don't bring the valance super low or extend the backdrop. So as compromise, we'll have the valance only 12 inches down, which means that we need the backdrop to extend up basically to the ceiling. So we're going to work on that. As you can see, I have some lights installed over here, and just earlier today around noon I got my other two sets of lights. So that is 12 more T5 tube lights, which will wrap all the way around the peninsula and then down through that curve and then back over this way. So I will first extend the backdrop, and then we'll move on from there working on the valance and the lighting, and by the time we are done we will have a fully lit, awesome looking, well, it's already a layout, but it'll look even better, and then it'll be on to extending the backdrop and of course getting all the tracks in, which is still a top priority, and I'll have the main line finished by next weekend. So check it out. Here is the first section that I'm about to screw in here. Before we go any further, I just want to talk about a couple things. First of those things is the frame extension I've made. So this is basically just a 2x4 on top of the existing frame, and that's cleated into the ceiling there. I'm going to do that in two other spots. One is in the middle of the frame. You can see one going up right there, and there'll be one on the end in a second too. So in addition to that, in the frame, the original frame height was like right there. You can see there's a 2x2 the cross section there, so that just runs all the way through there. What I'm doing now is I've set a 2x4 in between there, so that's going to act to anchor on this side. I already had backdrop installed, so now those two new sections will be anchored on that 2x4. It'll also give a little more surface area for this big piece to anchor into as well. So you can see it's almost full height, just a couple inches from the ceiling. I had to do a couple of cutouts. One of those is here, there's a big heavy metal beam that runs through that drywall, so I had to cut out the fascia around it, and now I'm going to work on doing that or installing the next section down here. But if we go back to the other side really quick, but here you can see just how tall that is. It gives it the full wall height effect. So I'm really liking how it's looking so far. I like the tall backdrop, so I think this is a good modification. Just finished putting up the extended backdrop, so I'm going to move on to doing the valance now. We'll do a quick walk around. Keep in mind that past this point we won't have a backdrop. This is just going to be an open scene. We'll have the main line up here curve out in front, and that'll head down this side of the peninsula, and then when it wraps around to the other side, that's the main line that you see there. So it's all the same line, but we'll have it in one scene, so that'll be kind of cool. Obviously you can see that the 2x4 is still exposed here. That will not be like that when we finish off the scene. I just didn't want to bring the hardboard all the way to the edge in the event that we wanted to, for some reason, extend this out, a little bit. It just gives us options, so it won't be too hard to hide that and make that all smoothed out when we do scenery. Anyway, walking down this way, you can see once again there's the cleats up in the ceiling. We just saw the one on the end there. So here is the first section of the valance that I've worked on. This is really just my first attempt at doing it, and this is one 8-foot section that I have then segmented down here to mimic how it is on the lower levels. So anyway, I did a cutout here for the portion of the ceiling. Obviously you can see the light seeping through the corners there. So what I'm going to do is just install the valance, all the the hardware and all that. And I knew this would happen because it's a spackled ceiling, plus I'm not going to make absolutely perfect cuts, and on the seams or anywhere where we have sections coming together, the light's going to come through there as well. So to fix that, I'll figure it out. I think for the seams I was thinking about using some sort of like heavy construction paper or yeah, I guess that's what I was trying to say. And then up on the ceiling then, you can get like this sort of porous foam in like thin strips, or there's also like automotive door seam foam as well, which would work good just running in that corner, and that would block all the light as well. So that'll be something I can add afterwards, but for now I just want to get all of the actual hardboard in. So this is where I am right now. What I've been doing for installation, I'll show you. Initially I was doing 1x4L girder sections, and these are about 4 inches long if you take a look under there. So not super big, just as like cleats. But what I've decided to do instead, and I've shifted towards this, is just doing the one piece in the ceiling. So this is just again another 1x4 section cut in 4 inches, and I'm doing that every 4 feet, which is convenient because then these lights are 4 feet long as well. So that'll work out for the most part, and this is enough here that I'll be able to screw the board in to the 1x4 right there. So that won't be hard, and it'll be plenty sturdy as well. And with that said, I'm just going to keep on working around the rest of the layout. There are quite a few curves along the layout, and obviously hardboard can have the tendency to be quite stiff. I mean, it's kind of in the name, it's called hardboard. So that is a fixable problem. As you can see here, I've actually been curving some of the sections ahead of time. So like this section here will go in the end of the aisleway, and then I'll also need some curved sections along the end of the peninsula too. So this just helps. It's not necessary, but it makes it a lot easier to coax it into position. With some straight sections that have not been curved yet, it's very difficult to lift those up and try to curve them simultaneously. So having a little bit of curve in it ahead of time is helpful. Obviously nowhere will we need a curvature that is that tight, but when we take the weight off and pull the chair back, it'll unfold into a wider radius, and it doesn't really matter what the exact radius is, as long as it makes it a little bit easier to get it into place. And the setup is quite easy. As you can see, I have a weight down there on one end, and then I looped the other end around so they meet at a right angle. The other way you could do this as well is to actually overlap the ends and then clamp them together, and that'll create a little more of a curve towards the end, whereas this setup I have here will ensure that we have a straight section, probably about a foot or maybe 8 inches of straight before it works into the curve on either end. So I found that one of the greatest difficulties in putting up the valance is doing it on your own. So if you don't have helpers, or you're just doing this by yourself, it's kind of difficult to get the pieces up there and screw them in and do all of it. So anyway, to help me, as you can see here, I've created some joists. These are just clamped to the front of the layout, and like on a couple of them here you can see I just screwed in a little tiny cleat there, and that helps the fascia, or sorry, the valance just sort of rest up there, unclamped or anything. And then over here, this one I just clamped. So there's various ways to do it, but this really helps to get the piece up there and hold it in place. So here's another good example of using the joists to hold up the fascia up above. So I'm screwing in this curved piece that comes right along here, and it's kind of difficult to get it up there. So You can see here's that joist. I've mounted it with a clamp here to the front of the layout, and then this little notch is on the inside, and then on the back side I've installed the cleat already. So then this joist here essentially clamps the board in between the cleat and this little notch here, and then that allows me to put a screw up there while the other end is being held to the other cleat. So what are we looking at here? Kind of an awkward angle, so I apologize. It's kind of hard to show everything in one shot. But what we got right here in front of us, this is the big I-beam that runs through the basement, so I've had to cut out around that. And this hardboard here is actually the piece of hardboard that we're working on last night when I showed how I put a bend or a curve in a section and let it sit for a few hours or overnight, so that when you unravel it, it already has some curvature to it. So it looks like two sections here because you can see I've made a cut, but as it turns out, this is the same piece that we're working on the other day, or just a few minutes ago, I guess. And what I did was I measured along the fascia out from this I-beam here. So I went down, I kind of marked where the I-beam is, and then I measured out from that until the point where I found the straightest section of fascia. So basically the point where this S-curve starts to transition into the other direction, and whatever that distance was, I can't remember, I think it was about 3 feet, I measured that on our board and then I made a cut. So this, just a little bit ago, actually would have all curved in one direction, but now, since I flipped this piece the other way, to the way it is now, it naturally curves this way, and then once it meets this cut here, it naturally curves the other way. And then this, which is the larger section, I am now working on wrapping around the end of the peninsula. So sometimes, as annoying as it may seem, it is actually easier to make more cuts so that you can break up the curves and have it flow more naturally. Well, we've just about got all of the hardboard in for the Valence, so now it is on to installing the actual lights themselves. These, what I'm using, are T5 LED integrated fixtures, and all integrated means is that there's no need for additional wiring of any sort. All the components and all the wiring is self-contained within this metal frame, which makes it super easy. All we have to do is install some mounting clips in the ceiling, and then once we get the light up in place, we hook up the connecting cords between the lights themselves. It's super easy, but let's go ahead and take a look at how to do it. So here you can see this is what our mounting clip looks like. This will go in the ceiling in this orientation, and once we get that up there, then this will snap nicely over the back of our light fixture like that. So we'll want to have one on either end. Now we should be able to just pop this guy up here, snap this end in. There we go. So the next step is going to be connecting up our lights, and this is what the connectors look like. They got kind of this three-prong head on them, but as you can see, they're only a few inches long, and there are multiple instances, at least the way that I'm running my lights, where I'm going to need to extend this, and that's easy enough. So what I'm going to do first is just kind of snip these here in half, and then I am using 18 gauge wire. I've been using these for my feeders, but this is going to work fine for this as well, and I've cut these into the length that I need, and I have two of the same color. Those will be the outside wires, and then there's one in the middle which is you can see is kind of marked yellow there, and that'll be our white wire here. So anyway, it's easy enough to do this. You just have to start to peel the wires back, just like I've done on the 18 gauge wire. I will then strip these, solder them together, and then we'll wrap this up in some white electrical tape, and we'll be good to go. So here's kind of what our connector looks like right now with the 18 gauge wires spliced in. I've already isolated all the joints at each end, and now we have to wrap the rest of it. So I'm just using Scotch white electrical tape. That's what I've got here on these joints. And to kind of finalize it and make it, I guess, look more presentable, we can wrap this all up, and here's a little trick. that I started to do. If you just start on this end, pull out a long stretch here, you can actually just start to twist, and this will take care of it. And in a sense, you're just kind of putting an electrical shroud around this, just like a cord might normally be wrapped. And in the end, it actually looks nice and presentable and not horrible to look at, especially since the ceiling is white as well. So there we are. So now all we have to do is plug it in. Well, as we can see, it looks like all the lights are working. There are a few things to touch up. For example, over here, we got to tack up this cord, as well as the cords that I was just plugging in. Those need to be pinned up to the ceiling in a nice tidy way. We also need the bridge, or the gap section installed there, just like we have over here on this side. And then, as you can see, I've started to work on installing, or I guess putting in, not really installing, but just sliding in some extra tie pieces over some joints that'll prevent there from being any kinks or gaps. And once all of those are in place and glued down, we will come back in. So you can see there's still kind of a gap here. Obviously that'll get filled in. We'll use some drywall compound or something. And then that all needs to get sanded and painted. So I'd say we're about 95% there. As I said, still need to touch up the cords, need to touch up some of the cosmetic things, and then do the painting. But in terms of the actual lights and the structure of the Valence, we are all done. And one final note, eventually we won't have power cords like you see down here. They will not just be hanging down. That's a temporary testing setup, of course. So those will eventually get rerouted, as well as the one down there. That'll all go back into the staging room, because eventually in that far corner back there we're going to install an outlet. So that's where all the lighting will go. But I think that's all I have to mention in this video. So if you guys have any questions or comments, of course leave those below and I'll try to get back to you as quick as possible. I really think that's it. So I'm very pleased with the way it's come out. I especially like this down here with the curve at the end of the aisleway. And the lights look great. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more. I'll see you guys next time.